Again, everybody, welcome and thank you for showing up. As you know, we have Daria Dubravic with us. I hope I'm pronouncing your family name correctly. Daria is a passionate biologist whom I met a couple of years back, and we've done together one amazing project. She really aspires in helping managers and engineers and policymakers to make more sustainable products, services, and organizations, but by learning from nature. Daria holds a PhD in interdisciplinary approaches to evolutionary biology from the University of Paris Descartes. And at the moment, she lives in France, and she's a freelance biomimicry specialist, right, Daria?
Yeah, thank you, Virana.
And she will be telling us today all about biomimicry and social resilience. So Daria, please take it away from here.
Okay, so thank you everybody thank you the Biomimicry Switzerland for inviting me. I'm apologizing for not being part of your first webinars, the first two. I've been quite busy with the baby at home, so that's a kind of a big excuse. But really happy to hosting the webinar with you, and hope that you will continue doing these things further on. So I'll share screen. Let's say. Okay, and then I go full screen. And do you see, is it okay? Somebody needs to unmute to tell me it's okay.
Perfect.
Perfect? Okay.
Yes.
So the focus of the webinar will be on biology of the resilience, and then more than on, let's say, some specific example of bio-inspired social resilience, because as I will go through the presentation, I feel that it's a very wide subject, that thinking to social cases, it's much more case-based, environment-based, and case-specific, opposed to, let's say, bio-inspired technical solutions where you can have antimicrobial surface, and then as a technical issue, you can just translate it to different technologies. But I'll go more into this I will go slowly into it during the talk. But I rephrase the topic as a biology of resilience. So the importance of this talk, and I imagine that's why you asked me to do a talk on this subject, is that there is a huge challenge today, in the sense of we need to cope with a world that is more and more complex, as we see, but less and less predictable. And these are just some of the examples of the complexity and the predictability issues that we are having. The current example, we've just lived through a very strong, let's say, example of perturbance, and hopefully we'll exit as more resilient societies, where we have that human invasion and destruction of wildlife ecosystems. So I've put it a bit more globally than just what's been going on at a single spot in China. Has led to the medical crisis, that's led to the global economical shutdown that will eventually, unfortunately, lead to the social crisis. So when I say complex systems that are faced with that are less and less predictable, is that you have one let's say input that spreads to the system and leads to different many different outcomes that are uncontrollable as well. So since I've mentioned the word of complexity and of systems a few times already in the few slides, I just want to put it down to clarify it. So a simple system is a difference between a simple and a complex system is not about the number of individuals, or let's say of actors in it. It's about the interactions between them. And so a simple system has a quite easily, let's say, simple and easy to model type of interactions. So if you put an input at one point, you know exactly how it will spread and where it will finish. Complex systems are very difficult to map. The type of interactions are, let's say, how to say, the type of interactions are multiple, and the spread of information is difficult to model and predict, let's say. But I think that the picture speaks for itself. Resilience in this context is the capacity of the system to recover from a perturbation. So this is a very simple graph of the recovery after of resilience as a function of systems performance. So you have a disruption that arrives that leads to a kind of a disorganization of the system. So the system performance decreases. And then if the system manages to overcome this perturbation, it can adapt and in, let's say, in the best outcomes, even increase its performance after the disruption by adapting to the system, by adapting to the new situation. So the idea with so the goal actually is to minimize the down loop, the downfall, and actually and trying to maximize the performance at the end of the perturbation. And this is also what we will be looking for in nature. So strategies that can help us absorb shocks more easily, recover more fastly, and then also adapt as much as possible. So as I said, I decided to focus the presentation on biological strategies for resilience. And then because I feel that it's already a huge subject that I think needs very careful attention. And if I would be speaking of bio-inspired, let's say, examples of how certain biological strategies have been applied to social situations, I feel that there will be more of a kind of a pop-up of success stories than really a wide palette of strategies that nature uses, and then each one of you can meditate on and see how you can start integrating that at your own very specific situations, because it's very much different if you're coming from a corporate, from a startup, from an association, or if you just want to do this on the individual level. So I did this is a topic that I'm very fond of, and my PhD was on resilience in social amoebas. So it's a microorganism in face of starvation. So it's a concept that that I'm very familiar with, I'm very fond of, and it's probably also the reason why I wanted to expose you to the richness of these biological examples. So since I started by saying that we live in a complex world, if we want to be resilient, we need to adapt resilience at different levels of that complexity. So here I will be talking about individual level resilience, community level resilience, and systems level resilience within nature's communities, within natural systems, let's say. So let's start with individual level resilience. I said at the individual level, the resilience is achieved as an interplay between something that we call robustness and on the other side, the capacity of an organism to change. You have very simple organisms. I said here, I put here bacteria just as an extreme example, that are more having the strong capacity to change and low resistance. And as the complexity of organism increases, the capacity to change decreases. And this is something that we also experience in our social systems. The more the system is complex, the more difficult it is to change. And the difficulty comes because you need to invest huge amount of energy in order to achieve this. So let's focus on some strategies that, let's say, bacteria, but then also other organisms use to accelerate that change, and then also the mechanisms that more complex systems use, organisms use to maintain its stability. Let's say that robustness is a function of stability. And I hope that, so this is a small movie just to represent, to put an image to a change, to the capacity of bacterial systems to change. This is the evolution of a bacteria on a, I don't know how to turn off. Okay. The sound. So this was an experiment at Harvard, at Harvard. So as you will see, they start, they plate bacterial community at each end of the plate. And then the numbers that are appearing is the increasing concentration of antibiotics that they've put on the plate. And so the arrows indicate direction of growth of bacterial communities. So you see on each side there is the white lawn of bacteria that starts growing, then it stops growing completely when it encounters antibiotics. And then very fastly, few strains, so a strain is few, let's say few individuals, gain resistance through mutations and spread until reaching another concentration of antibiotics where a new innovation is needed. You see here how innovation, how when innovation is generated to mutations, it's all about diversity. So there is not, and as we will see, there is not a single line of, there is not a straight line of innovation, but different strains. I will put a stop here. Different strains, so different, it's ended, and I don't know how to replay it. So I hope you get the idea of the spread of the spread of bacterial colonies by mutations and by exploring the creativity, but by creatively exploring the range of genetic mutations that will lead to the ones that are beneficial. So when I say mutations, and just focus to the, I'm sorry, this slide has too many information. Just focus on the left side on the screens. Mutations, genetic mutations is all about generating diversity, no? Through creative exploration of your genetic material. This diversity is then rapidly prototyped. So you are creating new cells with this genetic material that are then directly tested, and the ones that work are selected and then they propagate. I simplified the process of mutation in this way in order to help you maybe grasp on how use on how not on how, because you will not start mutating your companies, let's say, or but on the generality of this idea that generating diversity and rapid prototyping are one of the most rapid ways to adapt to changing conditions, because bacteria are the organisms that are most rapidly adapting to new situations. On the other hand, the way, because mutations are much more slower in, let's say, more complex organisms, as us, as mammals, as many other higher eukaryotes. Another very interesting way of generating diversity is actually through sexual reproduction. So this is why sexual reproduction is 4. Sexual reproduction is too simply or about recombination of genetic material of 2 individuals in order to create a new, let's say, a new idea. The advantage of sexual recombination over mutations is that mutations generate lots of, since they're exploring all range of situations, they're very rapid, but then they're also very deleterious because you have lots of ideas that that are false, let's say. Sexual recombination, sexual reproduction is more sure way of generating diversity because you're actually recombining strategies that work. So you have two healthy individuals that will share share their genetic material, and the probability of generating a new combination that works, so that's not deleterious, is higher. What is very interesting is that in reptiles and insects, some of them are actually reproducing asexually, and they switch to this sexual mode of production rather than to increase the rate of mutations when exposed to stress, because the idea of recombining things that works is very interesting. So not all change is achieved by changing your structural integrity, let's say. In biology, change can be also induced by a term that's called phenotypic plasticity. I'm giving you scientific terms like this for those that are interested in knowing more, can just type deep, and then they have access to large number of articles and knowledge on this on the internet. So phenotypic plasticity is the capacity of organisms to change its behavior or to change its appearance just by reorganizing what's already within it. So this is a very nice example of a water flea that's called Daphnia on Latin. So this is actually the two individuals is the same species having the same genetic material. It's just that one on the left has been exposed to chemical signals from predatory fish, while the other one has not. And so the one that has been exposed to the predatory signals have developed this helmet-like structure in order to protect itself from fish grazing. So this is just another way to emphasize the need of and the ability to be open to change, because it is one of the leading factors in resilience in nature. Now, if you cannot change, and this is mainly the case of complex animals, and especially within the complex systems and also complex organisms, this is what you want to do with your vital functions. So when change is occurring, you can start changing your let's say your appearance, your morphology. Maybe you can change the color of your fur. You can start migrating, but you don't want to start replacing your heart. I mean, this is your vital function. So for all the vital functions, and this is especially true in mammals, the strategy to resilience is robustness. So this is actually the capacity to remain stable in face of change. And this is achieved through something that's called, so the process of achieving this is called homeostasis. And it's achieved through a mechanism of negative feedback loops. So this is the example of maintaining temperature stable throughout a range of different external temperatures, which is a very difficult function that has been attained only in higher, let's say higher mammals, so birds and mammals. So you have a signal. So you need to always be responsive to external signals. Let's say that the signal in the temperature rises. This cascades to a range of responses that will try to lower down the temperature. So in case of mammals, this is that the blood vessels will dilate. This will result in the heat loss to the environment. You will start sweating. and the fluid evaporation at the surface of your skin will also tend to increase the heat loss from the body, which will lower the temperature back to its normal range. It's never one type of temperature. We are never stable at 26 degrees. We are ranging when from 35.5 to 37, let's say. So the idea of negative feedback loops, this is just one example. Such negative feedback loops are essential to bringing back the system to the equilibrium when it starts deviating, and basically include rely on constant sensing of the environment, very rapid response to the environment, to the situation in form of processes that have a negative initial impact on the negative impact on the initial situation. Opposite to the positive feedback loops, which we will be also talking about, that are relevant but in other situations. So this is, for example, very interesting to see how this negative feedback loop could be installed within a community in order to be responsive to changes in the situation, and then being able to bring the system back to its stable state. So the two strategies, let's say, I said that that robustness and capacity to change are, or as I said here, adaptability, are more or less emphasized whether you're a complex animal or a simple organism. In scientific literature, they're called K strategy and R strategies. So this is also for those who want to know a bit more and a bit more in details on how this works. So K strategy is employed by organisms that are usually big and robust. They usually have small number of offsprings and that need a longer care. So resilience is achieved through robustness, through homeostatic robustness for the vital signals within the complex systems, and then change, which is much more long-term, is achieved through sexual reproduction and behavioral plasticity. For example, migrations. I did not go in detail on that one. But for the R strategy, these are usually small organisms that are very evolvable. They have lots of offspring that develop fast. They employ a population level diversity, and they change through sexual reproduction and high mutation rates. What is very interesting is that when you see who is adapted to which kind of situations, K strategy organisms are adapted to rather stable environments with small fluctuations, and they can change, but that change is long and slow. While R strategy organisms, I'm sorry for misspelling here, are adapted to fluctuating environments. So this is something that's interesting in case of resilience. And they can adapt fastly, mainly through rapid change, through mutation and plasticity of the organism. So this is also one of the reasons why, let's say, in the face of, and I will come back to this at the end, in the face of the, no, actually, I'll stop here. I think there is already too much things to, I think this is already a strong idea by itself. I will skip this because I think there is too much information actually that I'm giving you. One thing that is very interesting is a way to increase individual resilience almost within any species is through cooperation. So cooperation increases resilience through the increase of through the increase of functional diversity. So when you have many individuals, they can start performing different functions. They can be, let's say, more adapted to certain situations than the others. I will come back to this later. For example, you have bacteria that can increase enormously the resilience to antibiotics, actually, not at all through mutation, but through gathering in a cooperative unit that's called the biofilm, which secretes a membrane that completely protects bacteria within the biofilm of antibiotics. So this is also an example of, in one case, functional diversity. So you will have within the biofilm individuals that will start more specializing on feeding, the other ones that will be more responsible for the secretion of the biofilm, and so on. And also, this is something that's that shows that this is also the example of the emergent properties that come with cooperation. And these are so the properties of the system that none of individual has by itself, but a group of individuals are able to perform. And so let's say none of the bacteria can secrete this membrane, this protective membrane, but a biofilm as a whole is able to do it. So this is a very important notion. I think that cooperation, in addition to, so let's say, to the capacity to change, is essential in individual resilience. And so this also leads us the community level of resilience, because when you start cooperating, you start building communities. So one of the essential parts of community level resilience is distributed intelligence. So I talked about functional diversity and emergent behaviors that come with cooperation, but there is also this notion of distributed intelligence, and that even individually non-intelligent organisms can start behaving as a highly adaptive intelligent units. I just put as an example the yellow organism is the blob, or the Pisarium polycephalum, and down the example of social insects, of bees. It's interesting to see the distributed intelligence is there is a generality to the way distributed intelligence operates. You always start with exploring and sensing the environment. So this is, for example, with the yellow blob slime mold. What you see is that the central unit is exploring in many directions. It's searching for food, actually, and in order to find food, it's exploring in all directions. There is no predetermined path. So what you food is actually is a cereal that you see. I don't know if you see on my screen. I'm circling it now. So
yes, we do see
the oats. So it's actually an oat flakes that he likes to eat. So you start with exploring and sensing the environment in all directions. Then you have the honest transfer of information to what about the environment that you are exploring. So this is very interesting in bees, that the bees that go to scout, for example, for new nests, the ones that return always give a very honest information about the new nests, the new locations for the nest that they found. So the new locations, so they go out in all the directions, they come back, they found a possible location for a nest. If it's not a perfect one, they will signal it as something, let's say, I found something interesting. It's not perfect, but maybe if there is nothing better, this can also work. Then you have the accumulation of information. So usually this is done through, for example, in slime molds, this is done through accumulation of chemical signals that reinforce certain information. So in this case, certain path that is leading straight away to the food. And then you have positive feedbacks. So the more something is good, the more individuals will go in that direction. And this is how collectively, how collective merges towards the most intelligent decision is through this positive feedback that direct more and more individuals to the best solutions. So in slime molds and in these, this distributed intelligence process is done through direct exchange of information between the individuals. What is very interesting in ants and termites is that the same type of process is done, but with what's called indirect collaboration. So they don't communicate. Ants and termites do not communicate with each other, but they do. But I'm just simplifying. In certain tasks, they do not communicate with each other, but they communicate with the structure itself. So this structure can be a path by laying chemical signals to the path, not by sending chemical signals to all the individuals within the ant colony. Or here is the example of termites and how they're rebuilding their nest in case of some disturbances that may lead to changes in humidity or changes in temperature within the nest. And so the idea of so they still perform this decentralized sensing. They explore in the whole environments. They sense the changes in the environment, and then they start putting information within the structure. That's, for example, if there is a hole somewhere, one ant will come. It will recognize that there is a hole. It will put a signal, chemical signal, on that spot, and it will start rebuilding rebuilding the nest. As it goes, it will leave the chemical signal on the path. More and more ants will sense that there is a chemical signal, that something is wrong. They will join. When they join, they will reinforce the signal, and this is how the a group of ants will gather and repair the nest. I think this kind of indirect collaboration is very interesting if we put it in the concept of internet and the way we can easily collaborate today, not directly by interacting with individuals, but through platforms. And Wikipedia, for example, is a very nice example of this kind of a collaboration. And so this now leads them to system level resilience, which actually in the scientific literature, you can find this more as a term of complex adaptive networks, because as we will see, system level resilience relies entirely on the way a network, so a network is a group of all of these dots and connections, is organized, and the way it performs as a unit. So the most striking example of network resilience that I've seen in biological systems, but it's not most striking, but it's more the illustrative one, is the one of bacteria. So you have two very similar bacteria. One is called Escherichia coli, and the other one is called Bushnera. So even I don't know, Aphidocola. So Escherichia is a bacteria that grows in fluctuating environments, usually in water, let's say in water and in aquatic environments. While Bushnera is the same kind of bacteria, let's say genetically very similar bacteria, but it lives in a very stable environment because it lives within the gut of an aphid. So it has the environment of the insect that's stabilizing its environment. And so a group of researchers looked at how internal metabolic networks of these two very similar bacteria are organized. And the two pictures above are the striking differences of how different networks and how networks adapt to fluctuating versus stable environment. So I realize now that I forgot to say one thing. I said that we are starting to talk about systems, and that systems is something that's above individuals. And now I'm coming back to individuals and talking about metabolic networks, which is something that's happening within the cell of a single individual. This is something that we can do, that we do constantly in biology, because in biology, everything is a system and a network, a system and a unit by itself. And so a network of within our own cells, there are enormous networks of metabolic networks of proteins and gene protein and gene interactions. And I did not put an example of ecosystem resilience, just because I find this example very much striking. So when we go and analyze these two very different networks that are caused by differences in environments. So one is fluctuating environments where resilience is needed, so capacity to change and to adapt to changing conditions is highly needed, while the other one is very stable environment where you don't need that kind of capacity, so you can focus on other functions. You see that changing environments are selecting for highly modular networks. So modularity within a network is a network a module in a network is a group of nodes. For example, here you have one that are highly connected within themselves. Here you have one, and let's say that here is another node. So modularity within the network permits two things. One thing, it permits to, when there is disturbance in one module, you can easily cut it off and localize the disturbance on that one node. And the other thing on the modularity is that different modules can gain more autonomy in situations of change where whole system is disturbed. There is lots of redundancy, so you see lots of same nodes with the same colors. So node is a dot, a spot. Redundancy is needed because if you lose one function, somebody else can replace that same function. And there is moderate connectivity. Connectivity increases, on one hand, the spread of information. So if you have a disturbance that needs lots of sharing information, connectivity will help you that. I say here that there is moderate connectivity because the other side of the connectivity is that also if you have that one disturbance, it can easily propagate within the system. So connectivity is a thing that you need to handle with care when talking about resilience. And so these kind of networks lead to the optimization because within many different situations they will stay functional, but they're not attaining their maximal production capacities. And this is something that's achieved by the network of the bacteria that's living in constant environment. So here you have a very different network that's that's non-modular. That's very low in connectivity. There is no redundancy. It's very straightforward, let's say. So this so this gives a maximum production rate within the network, but on the other hand, it's very unstable in changing environments because losing one node, since they're also very specialized, can perturb the whole network. So it's also to say that you cannot have maximization and resilience at the same time. Another very important let's say mechanism of resilience in systems is diversity. So this is something that comes to all levels of resilience. This is because functional diversification is one of the main mechanisms for resilience. You want to have a system where you have drought resistance individuals. You have those that fix very good nitrogen when nitrogen is lower, those that fix very good water, those that are very good resistant to disease. Like this, in case of spread of disease, you can have patches of the disease and not for it to spread within the whole, in this case, let's say the prairie, because this is the example that we're using. And also diversity gives redundancy. So for example, in the case of the prairies, you will have many different insect plant interactions. Like this, if one plant is, let's say, is sick that year, and then so the production is lower, this will not lead to complete decrease in the population of insects, because insects can rely on other species. And so faced with perturbations, the species composition within the prairie will change, but the ecosystem will continue to function and be able to stabilize itself after change. And then the species that, let's say, are less resistant to that change will be able to grow again within the once the system is stable. Okay, so the last very important notion of resilience within the systems is the control of flow. So this is also another example of control of flow with metametabolic network. Basically, the control of flow is when you are controlling the connectivity and the energy flow between different connections in order to maintain system stability. So this is, for example, how the strength of connections and the flow of nutrients change within a single bacteria, whether it's growing on glucose or whether it is starving. So you need to have a system where you are managing to control different connections and control how much each connection is being expressed within the system. So to sum up, because I've shown a wide palette of strategies that nature uses for its resilience. So if we sum up this to one slide, at the individual level, the main capacity to resilience is controlled by your capacity to change, and this is capacity to change, and this is mainly due to the way you generate the diversity, and that diversity will enable you to adapt to new situations. This is achieved through mutation, which can be there can be made a parallel between mutation and innovation. Moments of situations of resilience demand high investment in innovation, because that's the only way you can adapt to new situations. Robustness that the Vigilant develop is used. So robustness is maintaining the same state of maintaining the same state as you are in. So not resisting to change is accepted, but mainly for essential functions. And this is achieved through negative feedback loops. And then you have the cooperation that increases the resilience of a system to a new level. Once you got to that level, so the level of community, you want to use distributed intelligence to maximize the potential of the community. And so this is achieved mainly through the positive feedback loops. And as I said, accumulation of information and honest sharing of information. And then we arrive to the system level, where you have networks that need to be modular, diverse, redundant, where you can need to be able to control the flow between actors if you want to have a resilient system. So what's the time? I don't have time. Can somebody
We have 10 more minutes.
say to me what's the time?
We have 11 minutes to be precise. 11 minutes.
Can you say again, Pilena?
11 minutes.
11 minutes, okay. So just to one example to see how how all of this integrates within us, because I've shown examples of very different organisms, and this is how, for example, an example of how one organism achieves resilience. So this is an organism which I did my PhD. So it's a social amoeba. What it does is that in face of starvation, you have a billion of individuals come together and aggregate in these worm-like structures that then develop into this mushroom-like structure that you have here, with spores all the way to the top. So faced with starvation, what this organism does first, it starts to cooperate. So they said billions of individuals come together. This is achieved through distributed intelligence, because they coordinate their behavior of aggregation and then of movement of these worm-like structures and the creation of mushroom-like structure through sophisticated coordinated signaling. You have they use robustness because they generate spores. So spores are cells that are dormant. So they don't do anything, but they're capable of sustaining without food for very long periods. And then, and this is the last one, is the one on which I did my PhD. And so we discovered during my PhD that that in addition to all of these three strategies, they use the fourth one, which is called batch hedging. And this is the one that enhances their the diversity. So basically, they are employing. Not all organisms will enter this social path. Some individuals will stay as social, so as an individual's one, living for a few days on the plate. And so depending on how long the starvation period lasts, the ones that did not engage into the social path can quickly start exploiting new arrivals of food, while the ones that have engaged in the social process lose that advantageous time. And also one thing that I didn't mention, once you engage into the social process, 20% of the population needs to die in order to perform all the social functions. So it's very costly. Another very interesting way in which trees achieve resilience, and we're talking about trees is very interesting because these are the longest living organisms, the oldest living organisms on the planet. So you have certain trees that are, let's say, this more trees community that live for 80,000 years. That's kind of the highest maximum, but many of them achieve a few thousand years, which is actually quite extraordinary for a complex organism that cannot even move. So the resiliency in trees is achieved at the level of individuals through a modularity. So we have branches and roots that are almost functioning as an independent unit. So if you cut one, it will not affect the system. They have decentralized organization, so there is no single vital organs that you can, that when you kind of cut that branch, the whole tree will die. And then they're heavily relying on cooperation between different trees and fungi in the soil at the systems level. And they use seeds as their robust, let's say, dormant strategies that even if the tree dies, the seeds will survive. Final thoughts. I talked about a lot about resilience, and so how to sustain change. I have to just to end up by saying that the destruction and reorganization are part of complex systems' natural life cycle. So at the end, every system, once it reaches its maturity point, which let's say here, which is called conservation, which is a complex, mature state, at one point it releases its energy and goes into this reorganization phase where it explores different pathways, and then the ones that are most successful will again lead to a new mature state. But letting go of things is also part of nature's functioning. Nature is resilient but also fragile, huh? So let's not forget about this, especially since most of the human-made changes are very fast and very aggressive. So most of the systems don't have the capacity to change. And the ones that do, unfortunately, will not, cannot recreate in a very fast amount of time the biodiversity and the abundance that is needed for also our own stable survival on the planet. So if we go for a new resilience, let it be regenerative and some symbiotic one. So let's not forget that if we do get inspired from nature, to return that to stay coherent with planetary needs. Thank you all for the attention. I've been a bit too long.
Thank you very much, Daria. We have a question here from Jia Young. He's asking if you're going to share the slides because he would like to dive into the references. Will it be possible?
Yeah. So I'll think about that because I've worked a lot on the presentation. I think he can contact me directly, but anyway, the presentation will be online. So
yes,
so I think the references will be easily accessed through the video.
That's correct. We will have this recorded and available on the YouTube channel. So we'll let this. I mean, you can contact Daria directly or us, but I think we'll let Daria decide whether she wants to share the content or not.
Yeah. And I dropped our email address in case you want to contact us. It's info@bswiss.ch, and we're happy to answer any question. Chat.
So I'll switch from.
If you have a question,
stop sharing,
yes.
maybe.
Please unmute yourself and ask your question. We have a couple of minutes left, 3 minutes to be precise. So if you have a question, can you please unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, this is Randy. I'm wondering if there's a good reference or two you might be able to share.
The reference on
the resilience and social biology.
So I think there is one book. How is it called? Systems Resilience and Sustainable for Sustainable World, Sustainable Future. I think maybe that's one that's I did not cite it here, but yeah, Systems Resilience for Sustainable Future. That might be an interesting one. That's more that's more global than in biology. Let's say pure biology terms. I don't know any like this one. I just, as a scientist, I pick up research papers from here and there.
Mm-hmm. Who is it written by?
There's a question, Daria, on the chat that was posted earlier from Asnish. Can living beings adapt to the climate change and CO2 level by evolution, or the rate of change in all the parameters faster than the rate of evolution?
I don't know. So the big problem with climate change is that it's too fast. So this is a known fact. For example, we know examples of coral reefs that have adapted to increase in temperature, but this is because they lived in a, I forgot the name of the sea that was where the increase of temperature was gradual. So there are many organisms that can adapt very fast. You have all the bacteria, the microorganisms, the fungi. Trees are adapting very well to the increasing level of CO2. They're adapting less well to the heat and humidity levels. And the question is not where. I mean, lots of species will adapt. It's just that the adaptation phase will go through huge decrease in biodiversity, on which we are extremely dependent.
Okay, there's another question here from Leon. He asks, what is the author or reference for systems resilience for sustainable future? Google search doesn't give a clear source.
Because maybe I misspelled, so maybe it's not that one.
I think we do have your email addresses, so we will be sending you. It's
yeah, I can send the reference. Maybe it's not systems resilience. Maybe it's something else.
Yes.
Yeah, please feel free to send us an email. We'll talk to Daria, and Daria will give it to you, or we'll post it on the website as well. But,
and as we have a hard stop, it's exactly 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock in California. And Jack, I do know that you do need the link for another activity that you have. So thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for listening to Daria. And please do drop us an email if you would like us to organize anything for you. Tell us what it is, and we'll be happy to collaborate. Or if you want, come and join our association. Right, Jack?
yes, that's right. And I want to thank you again, Daria, for sharing your passion and knowledge. And thank you for this wonderful presentation. It was very insightful. I'm glad you were able to do this with us and with this community. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I did put in a chat the link to the website and the YouTube channel. Just bear with us that we will upload the presentation either today or at the latest tomorrow. But it will be on the YouTube channel as well as on the Biomimicry Switzerland website. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bilana, for co-hosting this event, and thank you.
Well, can I just say thank you all? I'm sorry for not having my head very clear. I see that I'm having a small baby that doesn't sleep, so I'm more tired than usual. So sorry for a bit confusing presentation, but I hope it was still interesting.
It was very well done, and it was great. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time for us, Daria.
Yes, it has been amazing. Thank you, Daria.
Great. Well, have a good evening. Good day for those of you who are somewhere else in the world. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.